Amazing. Bunshiro Maki endures adversity and lives nobly. Shuhei Fujisawa's semi-SHIGURE. Today I would like to introduce you to the 2003 NHK Friday historical drama semi-SHIGURE. Based on the original work by Shuhei Fujisawa, this drama was aired only one time, but I was completely overwhelmed by Sayo Uchino's powerful performance as Bunshiro Maki, who endures adversity and always tries to live nobly. However, I was completely captivated by his acting. To put it simply, I wondered if there were such great actors in Japan. Let's talk about how amazing it is and think about it together with everyone. So let's get started. Bunshiro Maki is 15 years old and grows up under his father-in-law, a lower-ranking samurai of the small Domake-jien of Tohoku called Anasaka-han. He respected his father, Tsukazaemon, and wanted to be like father someday. Bunshiro's life is filled with swordsmanship and studies with his close friends Ippei and Yonosuke while harboring a faint crush on his childhood friend Fuku who lives next door. When Yonosuke announces that he is going to Edo to pursue his studies, Bunshiro and Ippei cannot hide their loneliness. However, soon after that, a big change occurs for Bunshiro. His father was captured because he had been involved in a dispute that had been going on within the clan over who would be the heir to the clan. From that day on, Bunshiro's life changed completely, and his painful days as a child of a criminal began. Bunshiro isn't the only one. Other family members who did not know why they were taken prisoner were forced to wait for hours on a single bamboo mat under the scorching heat, while officials asked them to meet with their family members in a short period of time. The brave old man appealed that instead of making so many people wait for such a long time, the number of people should be adjusted in advance and the time should be made clear to make people wait, but nothing has changed. Is the system of making patients wait almost half a day in modern Japanese hospitals an extension of this Edo period custom? The day before his punishment was to be handed down, Bunshiro was allowed to meet his father, and asked him what had happened, but father did not answer and said, Bunshiro must not be ashamed of me. I did nothing to be ashamed of. I did it for the sake of righteousness. I know that you are going to have a hard time from now on. So I told you to do your best in the way of the sword. For the sake of righteousness means for the sake of justice. On the way home, Bunshiro tells his friend Ippei the following about the whole story of his meeting. Don't worry about mother, and above all, I should have told father that I was grateful for raising me this far. Ippei simply tried to encourage him by telling him that there are times when men have to cry, and that humans are hardwired to have regrets. I can imagine that you are at a loss as to what to say to your friends in such a situation. But Ippei's words have a point. I would want to meet someone who has no regrets. Bunshiro felt bad that he had more to say to his father. The next day, his father's punishment was announced. He committed seppuku. This means commit suicide. Bunshiro goes alone to pick up his father's body and breaks down in tears when he sees his father's death. Bunshiro, who was carrying his father's body in a cart, was approaching a slope when his childhood friend Fuku came to help him push the cart, holding a flower. Father doesn't tell me the detailed reason, and the officials don't give me any explanations. So I don't know how they know the reason for seppuku, and even if they do know the reason, they don't explain the process leading up to the death penalty, which is similar to modern-day trials. And my father and others. Everyone must have felt that this system, which has no way to save those sentenced to death, takes away people's lives as it sees fit, and is something that not everyone can accept. What is the death penalty for those in higher positions who give instructions to those under them without permission? I felt strongly that those who sentenced people to death should be exposed to the death penalty. I'm sure you all felt the same way. While it was raining heavily, Ippei said he had heard a rumor and came to inform Bunshiro about it. Within the domain, two factions were fighting over who should be the heir. One is on the losing side, Yokoyama, and the other is on the winning side, the chief retainer Satomura. That it is true. Bunshiro's father, Tsukazaemon, was made to side with the losing Yokoyama side out of obligation, and as a result, the Satomura faction that sided with the heir was determined to covet glory. Bunshiro's stomach must have been boiling when he learned the truth. This extremely unequal decision must have been Satomura's alone. What will Bunshiro do with this anger? Although the historical background is different, I don't know what would happen if you killed the chief retainer, but what would you do if you were Bunshiro? As the son of a father who later rebelled against Bunshiro, many trials awaited him, just as his father said. I think the most painful moment was when the young samurai were ridiculed as the children of criminals carrying criminals as they carried their dead father through town in a cart. He must have wanted to beat up the young samurai who didn't understand what he was talking about. What supported Bunshiro was Ippei and Yonosuke, who showed him the same friendship as before. The kindness of Fuku and his mother, and his father's last words to him, saying, "Don't be afraid of the way of the sword." Bunshiro trains his sword every day. His heart must have been full of hateful villagers. Meanwhile, Fuku decided to go to Edo. Apparently she was assigned to work in the back of the Lord's mansion. It was a painful farewell for both Bunshiro and Fuku. Wanting to meet Bunshiro before leaving for Edo, Fuku hurried to Bunshiro's house, where he had moved into a tenement house on the orders of the domain. However, without being able to meet, Fuku left for Edo. Did Fuku just go to say goodbye to Bunshiro at this time? You will find out more about this at the end of this drama. Please wait. If you were a woman, what would you say? A few years later, Bunshiro, who has become a young man, is told by the chief retainer, Satomura, to restore the honor of the Maki family, and Bunshiro devotes himself to work around the village. Meanwhile, Yonosuke returned from Edo after completing his academic training. Bunshiro, Ippei, and Yonosuke are happy to be reunited. However, Yonosuke started telling Bunshiro a surprising story. It is said that Fuku became the Lord's concubine and became pregnant with his child, which caused her to become embroiled in a factional struggle and miscarry. Bunshiro knew that Fuku had become the Lord's concubine, but he didn't know that Fuku was also involved in a factional struggle. Bunshiro couldn't remain calm, but there was nothing he could do about it. After a while, Yonosuke again told him what happened to Fuku. Fuku became pregnant again with her lord's child, returned to her hometown, hid, and gave birth. Bunshiro headed to Kunugi Palace, the villa of the lord who lived there. The calves are certainly here. Bunshiro was convinced of this by the strong security guard, and hoped that nothing would happen. Afterwards, Bunshiro is called by Satomura, and he is asked and given the following information. Less than did you know that Fuku gave birth to Tono's child at Kiyaki Palace? The child is at the center of the disaster. One faction within the domain is interfering with the idea that someone who is not Fuku's child should be the heir. There was no need for him to say anything else, and he was told to kidnap Fuku's child from the Kiyaki Palace. When he tried to refuse, he was threatened and asked who was responsible for restoring the honor of the pastoral family. So he had no choice but to accept the offer. Bunshiro knows it's a trap but can't do anything about it, so with the help of Ippei and Yonosuke, he takes Fuku and child into custody and then meets Yokoyama, a chief retainer of the Satomura faction's opposition force and the man his father worked for. It's finally the day of execution. Bunshiro and Ippei head to the Kiyaki Palace where Fuku is located, but the Satomura faction has already begun to send out a raiding party to kill Fuku and her son. It was a strategy to kill Bunshiro at the same time. Will Bunshiro be able to save Fuku and the child safely? Although Bunshiro has been practicing swordsmanship and is known to be strong, he has never actually cut someone down. The same goes for Ippei, who came to help. Bunshiro had the swords gathered around the room and stabbed them into the tatami so that he could use a new sword instead of the one with the blood on it. Bunshiro entered the palace and told Fuku of the seriousness of what was about to happen, and told her to escape to the mansion of Chief Warlord Yokoyama, who was in conflict with the Satomura faction. Afterwards, a raiding party from the Satomura faction was about to enter the mansion. Bunshiro cut off all but one of the raiding party. However, there was one person who stood in his way, Inukai Hyoma, who had the most outstanding swordsmanship of the Satomura faction in the dedication match. Bunshiro was exhausted after fighting a large group of Satomura faction raiders, but before he fought, he laughed out loud and stood up to the terracotta soldiers. What is this laughter? After winning the autumn dedication match, Bunshiro received a military technique called the Secret Sword Murasama, which uses the mind's eye, from the dojo owner, Yazaman Ishikori, Renji Ishibashi. Bunshiro used the Secret Sword Murasama's technique, the mind's eye, to defeat Hyoma. After defeating the entire raiding party, Bunshiro and his children headed to the residence of the Yokoyama chief retainer, but as the Satomura faction was on high alert, he hurriedly decided to go to the home of one of the Yokoyama faction. Did Bunshiro go home after making sure that Fuku and the child were safe? No, he goes to the house of Satomura, the enemy of his hated father. When they pass through the gate, of course Satomura's servants are holding swords and trying to cut down Bunshiro. Bunshiro slashed one of servants who attacked him, and when he said, "Don't worry. It's Minuchi," none of the servants came out to attack him because they were scared. Bunshiro violently opens the door to enter the room confidently. Satomura is naturally surprised. I guess they hadn't heard from the extinct Satomura faction yet. Fueled by anger, Bunshiro fluidly says what he wants to say while loudly yelling at Satomura. Less than people died needlessly. I brushed away the sparks that fell on me. People died because of the personal interests of the chief retainers. Greater than then, Satomura baselessly claims that they died for the sake of the clan. It seems that the chief retainer had no regard for the feelings of the dying person. While Bunshiro said twice that it was a feeling of dying, he used his sword to slash the legs of the table next to where Satomura was sitting. And he adds, "It's something like this." Satomura was able to show that the heart of a dying person is something that he had just experienced. Satomura probably thought he had already been cut, so he just sat there without moving. Bunshiro Maki's long-standing grudge was brought out all at once, and I found myself applauding and thinking, what a cool Bunshiro Maki, or rather Sayo Uchino. How will the Satomuras take responsibility for killing so many people for their own personal gain? That is left to the imaginations of readers and those who have seen the movie or drama. But when we translate it into modern times, we see the problem. In other words, it can be said that both politicians and bureaucrats have never moved beyond the Edo period. When they were saving money, the Noto Peninsula was hit by an earthquake and there were still many people who couldn't go home, who had no homes, no running water, and no food. But those who had money to spare went to great lengths to make money. This is Japan. Haven't we made any progress since the Edo period? It is human nature for the people to want to do to these members what Bunshiro did to Satomura. That's why he should immediately quit being a member of the Diet. That's what we often call accountability. Ryotaro Shiba, a historical writer, said this. In the samurai era, there was a method of taking responsibility called seppuku. Most politicians don't know how to take responsibility because it doesn't exist now. As a result, the Yokoyama faction overpowered the Satomura faction and took control of the domain's politics. Because of his accomplishments at this time, and in recognition of the past accomplishments of his father, Sukazaemon, Bunshiro was given an additional 30 koku. That means it is a large amount. Some 20 years later, one day, almost a year after the death of the feudal lord who loved Fuku, Bunshiro, who had inherited the name of Sukazaemon and became the county magistrate, suddenly received a letter from Fuku. The contents of the letter have been translated into modern language as follows. I would like to make a comment. I am relieved that my son Chiyomaru will be able to be adopted as the successor to our family. Now, with the first anniversary of the death of the great lord approaching, I have decided to become a nun this fall in order to rid myself of the worries of the world. You may think this is something I'm not used to doing in my life. But I've come to the back of my mind today to meet you once. If you are able, we would be more than happy to come visit me. However, please take care not to overdo it. I wrote this letter as a request for good luck in case something happens. To Mr. Bunshiro Maki from Huku in their final encounter, Fuku speaks first. I was about to give up, thinking you couldn't come anymore. Fuku goes on to say, do you remember when I was bitten on the finger by a snake at the river and you sucked the blood and let me out? The day we watched fireworks together. The day before I left for Edo, I went to Bunshiro's house to tell him that I wanted to become your wife. But I couldn't tell the truth and went home crying. Bunshiro also shares his grateful memories. Do you remember how you came running to me when I was carrying father's body in a cart? Even if I try to forget, I can't. Fuku less than wasn't there a way for Bunshiro's child to be my child and my child to be Bunshiro's child? Greater than Bunshiro less than that is the regret of my life. Greater than Fuku continues. Today I am Fuku. This means that she is not a concubine, but a childhood friend, and that she still has feelings for Bunshiro since childhood, and her feelings for Bunshiro have not changed in the slightest. I don't think there is anyone who doesn't shed tears while listening to this conversation. The times were so feudal that modern-day freedom was restricted, and people could not even express their true feelings, and their lives were dictated by the people in power. Not only that, but people who lived in a time when they had to commit seppuku without being told the reason clearly must have felt envious of their own circumstances and of society as a whole. Feeling such sadness, Fuku tells Bunshiro that even though she regrets that the two of them couldn't get married, she couldn't do anything about it. Fuku chose to become a nun because she wanted to live out the rest of her life quietly and not be influenced by those in power. If you think about the intent of Shuhei Fujisawa's original work, you will find that the lives of common people in the Edo period were far more limited than they are today. Translated into modern times, many people are now able to lead happy lives. I feel like it is telling us that we should move on with deep gratitude for the path that our predecessors have built. Last but not least, those who have watched this drama or movie or read the original work will feel that the way the 4 seasons are represented is very clear, as it is a story of the Tohoku region during the Edo period. That appears in the video. It means that it is beautiful and calms your heart. As the theme states, in the summer you can always hear the cries of cicadas everywhere. In the fall, the leaves of trees turn red or yellow, wither and scatter, and in the winter, there are blizzards and light snow reminiscent of bitter cold, and in the spring, the rice fields are plowed by cows and horses. The story depicts the endless beauty of the 4 seasons as Bunshiro and his friends grow up. The friendship between his friends Ippei and Yonosuke, the love he has with his childhood friend Fuku, and Bunshiro's way of life, where he stands up to authority and tries to live a noble life, and what it means to be young and strong, which seems to have been lost now. Asks us questions such as, what is justice? The story is so sad and strong, and along with Sayo Uchino's acting, this is a top-notch historical drama that you won't want to watch without crying. All of Shuhei Fujisawa's stories from the point of view of ordinary people appeal to the sovereign people, which we must not forget as the world becomes more power-oriented. The only way to create a world in which everyone is happy to be alive is through sovereign citizens. However, Bunshiro's way of life teaches us that no matter what happens, we must not give up in order to achieve that goal. Let's join forces with Shuhei Fujisawa, who brought this moving period drama into the world. The final scene of this drama ends with Bunshiro riding a horse, after parting ways with Fuku, running through the cicadas down a path illuminated by the bright sun. If you would like to experience Sayo Uchino's acting skills on NHK, please check out the digest version. The movie SHIGURE was produced by Toho in 2005 and starred Sumgoro Ichikawa and Yoshino Kimura under the guidance of director Mitsuo Kurotuchi. If you are interested, please check it out as it is being broadcast on YouTube.